Okay.
All right. This week we're going to begin with Shemot, also known as Exodus. We're in chapter 38, and we're beginning with verse 9. Verses 9 through 20, Kasuto said the following: There are more changes in connection with the words, their order, and the arrangement of the subject matter than in previous paragraphs. But in the final analysis, these two are to be classified as variations of form. In other words, they're saying the same thing even though they vary in their form. Why do they vary in their form if they don't mean something different? They vary because among the Jews of this time period, monotony was a real problem. So they would rearrange things and put things in different order. They're saying the same exact words, just in a completely different order. It doesn't mean anything, it just means that the writer was bored. It's why they use different words more often than not, as we're finding out from studying the Ugaritic texts from the time period in Mesopotamia. Anywho, um, verse 9, literally in English, would come out something like, And he made the court, two sides southward, hangings the court. That's probably linen, not the word six, because six and linen are not just sound alike words, they're spelled alike words, and my computer keeps getting that wrong. So I'm sure it's linen from twisted. That's why I'm sure it's linen, because from twisted means fine linen. 100 in measure. And that really ought to sound familiar to some of you because we've already had this verse. There is a bit of difference here, though. Let me get down here and look at it. Here's my translation of verse 9. And he made the court. Now, I'm going to leave something out. And he made the court on the south side southward, the hangings for the court of fine linen, 100 cubits. Okay, so what's missing are the words of the Mishkan. Because if we look at chapter 27, verse 9, the only difference is it says, And you shall make for the court of the Mishkan, those are the missing words from this verse, on the southern side or on the south side, southward. The hangings for the court of fine linen, 100 cubits in length to the one side. Okay, yeah, so a link to the one side wasn't in this verse either. Oh my gosh, see, that's a whole new law. No, it's not. They've already said it. They don't feel like they need to repeat the whole thing. It's just a general overview, if you will. And it's odd coming from a place where normally they're giving more detail. But in these verses in this chapter in particular, we've gone from giving more detail to giving a general overview. But anyway, in some places there is more detail than others. But mostly in this chapter, I think it's the other way around. Anyway, Rashi pointed out that Onkelos used the same word, kelaim, or hangings in English, in this verse for grating, as he did in verse 27:4. He then concluded that the hangings had holes in them. In other words, the curtains were made like grates. If he is correct, the curtains could have looked much like modern-day chain link fencing. I mentioned this in verse 27 or chapter 27 as well. It would still have created a barrier and would have been much less susceptible to wind if you think about it. Rashi further stated that the hangings were suspended from the post like the sails of a ship hanging from the mast. Rashbam wrote that the hangings had designs woven into them. However, his assessment cannot be correct if Rashi is to be believed. And it could go either way, honestly. I mean, if you think about it, anything that's sewn in this manner, I mean, they're weaving something together. If it's material, it's still chain link, just a whole lot tighter, and the holes are much smaller. Anyway, we don't know for sure about what Rashbam said. I don't find it very likely, though it's very possible. I think they would have said something. Anyway, moving on. Verse 10, literally in English, pillars there 20 and bases there 20. Brass hooks the pillars and clasp they silver. Again, nothing new. Sounds very familiar, at least it should to some of you. My translation, there are 20 pillars and there are 20 bases, the pillars, hooks of brass, and its clasp of silver. Sounds a lot like chapter 27, verse 10. And 20 pillars and bases, the pillars, hooks of brass, and its clasp of silver. So there's a slight change in the way they said it, but it's saying the same thing. There's no talking points here. Rashi wrote that the posts were 5 cubits apart. He said that the sockets rested on the ground and the posts were connected to them. Again, all you got to do is some simple math. If you know how many posts there are and you know how far the distance is, which we've been given all that information, it's simple division. So, yeah, he's probably right. Just throwing it out there. Although if you did it by today's mathematical standards, God only knows. Or the liberals only know, I'm not sure. Anyways, in verse 11, literally in English, it would read, and to side north, 100 in cubit pillars, there are 20, and bases, there are 20, brass hooks, the pillars, and clasp they silver. Sounds a lot like what we just did, only we're on the other side, right? We're going from the south to the north. So let's take a look at what my translation is. I'm skipping a lot of stuff here because we've already done it, and I don't see the reason to do it again, especially with some of these being that this is the third time we've done them. All right, so anyway, my translation. And the north side was 100 cubits with 20 pillars and 20 bases, 20 brass hooks for its pillars and its clasp of silver. So it's identical. It would make sense. Otherwise, your building will not be square. Just saying. So if we can compare that, of course, to chapter 27, verse 11. And again, if you want the detailed part of it, word for word, just go back and watch the video on chapter 27, because that's where you get all the detail. So what the translation was, though, and accordingly, the north side, the hangings will be 100 cubits in length, and its pillars and bases will be 20, and the pillars, hooks of brass, and its clasp of silver. It says exactly the same thing, just in a little variation of the way it was said. Okay, now, in our next verse, the words, the width of the court, are missing. And the words, 10 hooks for its pillars and its clasp of silver, have been added. So you got a little of rounding it off and adding to it. You kind of get a little variety on this one. So verse 12, and to side C, hangings 50, in measure, pillars there, 10, and bases there 10, hooks the pillars and clasps there silver. All right, so we're going to look at a couple of words here that are new. This is brand new to us, so we're going to have to go over at least part. I don't see any reason to go over every bit of it, since, again, we've had these words so many times at this point. So let's just go over the words that are new. Our first one is asara, which just means 10, the number 10. Then it says vave, so 10 hooks. This is one of the very few words, if you look up in a Hebrew Bible lexicon, if you start with the words that begin with a vav, you'll find out there's not very many, and this is one of them. And the vav is a hook or a peg. It can be a peg. It's more commonly thought of as a hook. It could even be a nail. That'd be the right word, because those nails that you have that they use in the railroad. You know how it's flattened on the top and it has that little piece sticking out. That would still be called a vav in Hebrew, especially Bible Hebrew. I don't know about modern. Probably use something else. Maybe, I don't know. I don't do the modern thing very much, or at all. But anyway, that spike is what we would call it, would still be called a vav. A regular nail is still kind of a vav, because they don't necessarily have to have a hook to be a vav. But more generally speaking and generally thinking about it, if it's a vav in Hebrew, it will probably have a hook on it. All right, so what would I compare that to? We're hanging curtains, and you have the little things that have a hook on it, and they hook into little roundy things to hold your curtain up. That's exactly what we're talking about. All right, so then our next word is ha'amudim. That's the pillars. Oh, well, it's not a new word to us, but it is new to the sentence. It's new to the idea. They're adding something here, so I thought we should go through that too. It's a column. It's a pillar. It could even be thought of as the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Those were technically, they were still pillars, right? Why? Because they had that shape. If you think of a plantation house, the pillars that are in front of it, or I want to say state house. I'm not sure if that's the right thing, but on all of those government, the fancy ones, they always have the big poles in front of them. That's what we're talking about. They can be square. They don't have to be round. But who knows what's what unless they specify, right? So your next word, lacha shukehem, and clasp there, Their. So their clasp is the way we would say it. These are joinings, poles or rods, which were used to join together the top of the column of the court of the tabernacle, and from which the curtain or hangings were suspended. That's strange, because clasp is not the word I would use for a pole. Anyway, that's what they used. Kesef, of course, is silver. So the translation, and we're adding something to the very end of it, and to the west. West? Wait, what? When did you ever say west, Rob? Well, the sea. It said to the sea. To the side of the sea, remember? That's the west in Israel. Just throwing it out there. Yeah, that's how we know it's the west. And that's what they did say. They didn't have a word for west, if you will. They said sea, because that's where the sun rose, was over the sea. So, and to the west, no, that's not right. That's where the sun went down. Stop thinking about that. That ain't right. It rises in the east, it sets in the west. Okay. All right, so to the west, the hangings, 50 cubits, with 10 pillars and 10 bases. And then here's the new stuff. 10 hooks for its pillars, and its clasp of silver. All right, so we can compare that to chapter 27, verse 12. And the width of the court to the west side, the hangings, 50 cubits, with 10 pillars and 10 bases. Right, so now here they've added the 10 hooks, its pillars, and its clasp of silver. Well, I don't know why they didn't say it earlier. You'd have to ask Moshe, and I don't know where he is right now. We all kind of think we do know where he is, but I don't think he's going to show up and answer your questions, all I'm saying. If he ain't going to answer it, I don't know the answer. Just throwing it out. All right. The words, the width of the court on, those words are missing from verse 13. It's very short in this one. And to side eastward, 50 cubit. Yeah, so all of that stuff is in chapter 27, but I've got it in italicized letters in a little box, and they're in blue, so that when you guys read the book, you'll know those words weren't there. Anyway, so it says, and here's the stuff that's added. The width of the court on, then, here's what it said. The east side eastward, 50 cubits. If you look at 27, it says, and the width of the court on the east side eastward, 50 cubits. Right. So they left it out again. It was already said, and they didn't feel the necessity to say it again. Verse 14, hangings 15. That's how we would say 15. They say 15. 15 cubit to the side pillars there, 3, and bases there, 3. Pretty sure we've had this one as well. Let me check real quick. Yeah, we have. So our translation, the hangings at the side were 15 cubits with 3 pillars and 3 bases. In 27:14 it said, and the hangings at the side are 15 cubits, 3 pillars and 3 bases. Because remember, I don't know why it says are. That really kind of should say will be, because in 27 it was they were going to do it, and then in 38 they had just completed it. Hanging at the side. Yeah, that's why it says were 15. I think I might have missed something in 27:14, because it's not that it are, it's that it will be 15. Yeah, so probably have to edit the book a little bit there. All right, then in verse 15, literally in English it says, and to side the second from this and from this, remember that's an idiom, to gate the court hangings 15, cubit pillars there 3, and bases there 3. Sounds good. I got to check something here real quick before we move on to make sure. Yeah, we've already done this. All right, so my translation is, and from the second side to the gate of the court were 15 hangings, 3 pillars, and 3 bases. In chapter 27:15, it said, and the second, I don't know where that came from, just words jumping in my head now. It's what it says is, and the hangings at the other side, which would be the second, other side, the second, are 15, 3 pillars and 3 bases. The text utilizes from this and from this, which changed the verse from and to the second side, from this and from this, the gate, to and from the second side to the gate. From this and from this just means from here to there, if you will. It's not so much that it's an idiom, it's just that in Hebrew, sometimes you say things a little different than the way we say them in English. And that's really all that amounts to. So moving on to verse 16. All hangings the court round about, linen from twisted. Yeah, it looks like I got the right word here. Okay, yeah, there's a bunch missing from this one as well. So all it actually says is all hangings around the court from fine linen. Because remember, when they're saying the word shesh, which means 6, is a sound alike and a complete spell alike, because you have the other word shesh is linen. It's something white, the white like white marble. It's so called from its whiteness. It's all about being white, and linen apparently is white. But it says ma shazar, not Shazam, but shazar, from twisted, literally. It's to twist the thread from right to left or backhanded. In other words, from right to left or left to right. Doesn't make any difference which way you twist it. You twist together several threads. I actually saw this on the Modern Marvels or How It's Made or whatever that was. It was running on the TV when I walked in there yesterday. They were showing them spinning the rope, It was really kind of cool. But it's just because they're trying to say fine linen here. They say it differently in Hebrew. So remember, what it says is all hangings around the court from fine linen. But what it said in verse 38:9, now this is from the same chapter. This one's already in there, right? But it said, and he made the court of the Mishkan on the south side southward, and here are your words, the hangings for the court of fine linen. And of course it said 100 cubits. But you also find this in 27:9, and there's a bunch of words that were in it that are not here. And you shall make for the court of the Mishkan on the southern side or south side, southward, the hangings from the court of fine twisted linen, or fine linen, rather. Fine is in place of the word twisted, so that you get the right idea. So the words are here. Why they decided to take out just that little bit and say just that, well, they've already said it now a second time in the same verse, and they're still quoting from the same place, which has already been said, so kind of seemed like too much to the writer, I guess. Now in 17 it says, and the pedestals for the pillars, brass hooks, well, it doesn't say for, it says brass hooks, the pillars, and clasp their, Their, and their clasp is how we would say it, silver, and overlaying heads them, silver, and these from joiners, silver, all pillars, the court. And I'm thinking that one we've already had as well. It sure has a very familiar ring to it. Let me test it out in my theory here. Yeah, looks like we did. It's like they've combined a few things here. So the translation, and the pedestals for the columns of brass, the hooks for the columns and their clasps of silver, and overlaid their tops with silver. And the dowels, what was that word we had for the dowel a while ago? Joiners. Those are the dowels. And the dowels and all the columns in the court of silver. So, if I'm thinking right here, we've got this, it shows up in 3 different places. In 38:10, see, we've already had this part, it says there are 20 pillars and there are 20 bases, the pillars, hooks, here it says, of brass and its clasp of silver. We have of brass, the hooks for the columns and their clasps of silver, right? So that's being said now for a second time in the same chapter. Then, if you look at 27:10, it says, and 20 columns and pedestals. No, that's the one I just did, right? Oh, yeah, and it starts off, and the pedestals for the columns. So it doesn't say that there are 20. It just says the pedestals for the columns, where in 27:10, it said that there were 20 pedestals. And then if you look at 27:17, the end of it, it said silver dowels and hooks and their bases of brass, which this one says the pillars, hooks of brass and its clasp of silver. So I'm reading the wrong thing. Of brass. No, I'm still reading the wrong thing. And the dowels of all the columns in the court of silver. There we go. So it's getting a little convoluted at this point. They're saying the same thing just over and over again, and now they're mixing 2 and 3 verses together and taking bits and parts of the 2 and 3 and throwing them together like it's something new. It is not something new. This writer, we believe to be Moshe, who did it, he didn't have an editor. He didn't have a computer where you can go back and check, now what did I write in chapter whatever? He didn't have chapters and verses either. So this kind of thing's going to happen naturally as the same writer writes on and all of that. I mean, I'm saying south side in one place and saying southern in another. This is a very natural thing for someone writing something to do. It is not a mistake. It's not the Holy Ghost told him to say one thing and he wrote another. It's not fallibility. It's none of that stuff. It's just the way, the human condition. It's just the way humans write. And that's all it amounts to. These are not different laws. They're not for different reasons. They're not for different talking points. It's just the natural course of writing something. All right, verse 18. And screen gate the court did needlework, violet and purple and scarlet, crimson and linen from twisted, and 20 cubit length and height in width, 5 measures, corresponding to hangings the court. Again, something that ought to sound really familiar to us. And I don't know if you guys remember, but the words that I'm giving you for these colors, there's truly no way for us to know what those colors were. I know people will argue with me about that. Well, the blue came from this and the red came from that. That's what we say now. We have nothing from the time period that specifies those things. Yes, we use the word for the muscle for the color blue, but we don't know that that's what it was, where it's from that time period. I think I talked about that in chapter 27 if you want to hear the detail on that, but we really don't know. So I'm just going with the traditional colors because we know they're going to be close. We know that it's close to, it's some form of blue, it's some form of crimson, some form of purple, and so on. The exact colors, of course, we don't know, is all I'm really trying to say here. All right, so verse 38, it says, "And the covering for the gate of the court from needlework of fine linen, violet and purple and scarlet and crimson, 20 cubits in length and height, and the width was 5 measures, corresponding to the hangings of the court." Yeah, so this is the entry to the tent. That's why it's so tall. It's not the one on the outer court, which is almost exactly like it. All right, except shorter. So 27:16, it says, "And the covering for the gate of the court will be 20 cubits long, made from a needlework of fine linen, violet, purple, scarlet, and crimson, and 4 pillars and 4 bases." That's for the purpose of holding that single curtain. Kusuno wrote the following: "The shape of the court was thus rectangular, 100 cubits long and 50 cubits wide, and the total number of the pillars was 60. Each of the 4 pillars at the 4 corners is, of course, counted only once in the aggregate, although actually it served both adjacent sides insofar as it was necessary to complete the number of spaces between the pillars, in order that there should be, for example, 20 intervals of 5 cubits each between the pillars. 21 pillars are needed, but the last pillar also serves as the first of the adjoining side, and so on right round, until we reach again the first side at which we started, the first pillar of each side serving as the last pillar of the preceding side. Thus, in practice, 60 pillars suffice exactly for 60 spaces. In this way, it is to be understood the arrangement of the pillars of the screen of the court gate, which the exegetes have needlessly found difficult. On the east side, there are 15 cubits of hangings on the right-hand side, 15 cubits of hangings on the left, and 20 cubits of the screen in the middle. All this requires 10 spaces of 5 cubits each between the pillars, and hence 11 pillars. If we take into account the 10 pillars mentioned in the text as belonging to the side, 3 plus 4 plus 3, and the pillars at one of the corners, which was already counted, with the pillars of the one of the longer side, we arrive precisely at 11. It is not to be deduced, therefore, that on account of this screen will not be in the middle. On the contrary, it will definitely be in the center. The 15 cubits of hangings at the one shoulder, which require 3, blah, 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 blah. Listen, let me tell you what's going on. It says there's so many pillars that go this way, so many that go that way, so many that come back this way, and some that go across that way. The problem with the exegetes, as he calls them, is that they're counting the same pillar over and over again. So if it says it's 10 on this side, and then there's 5 on this side, well, now they're trying to say there's 10 here and 5 more here. And what he's saying is, no, there's not. There's 10 that go from here to here. Counting the number 10 is number 1 now, because we're going in another direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the number 5 one here becomes number 1 for the next 10 here. So the 10th one here becomes number 1, and then we get all the way over to the other side, and the one that's already there is number 5. Does that make sense? Okay. That's what he's trying to say in a nutshell. They're trying to put too many poles in there, which would, in fact, throw the entrance off to a side, because then you'd have so dang many poles. It's not practical. And people who said that probably never put a tent up. Certainly not the tabernacle. You know what I'm saying? It would really help people to see it and understand it if at least one time in their life they had to go help someone actually erect a tabernacle in the wilderness. It'd be fun. Even if you didn't, you're too old and decrepit and stuff, and you can't help, sit in your wheelchair and watch it. It'll all make a lot more sense that way. Wish somebody would do that. Oh, wait, they do that in Israel. Anyway, just saying. I'll need to make a trip to Israel and look at that place, at least look it over, walk around. I know they have statues of people and it's forbidden by God's law, But still, at least you could go and see the, I mean, we're talking 2 scale. You can go to Israel and see one 2 scale. How cool would that be? Sign me up. All right, verse 19. By the way, when I do that, I'm looking at a clock to make sure my time's still there. Sometimes it gets away from me. Verse 19. And pillars there and bases there for brass is the number 4, and hooks there silver, and overlaying heads them, and clasps they silver. And by the heads they mean the tops, right? Because again, Hebrew is what we call a primitive language, Bible Hebrew. So they use a few words, and each word has to have a lot of meaning. It has to be used for a lot of different things, right? Everything has to be built on something else. So few words, lots of meaning. English is lots of words, little meaning. Although you never know that by looking at our dictionaries, right? Let me check this out before we move into this. Somewhere we go into all new stuff, and I'm not positive where that is. Well, I think this is the new one. Yeah, we better take a look at this one a little closer. Because this looks brand new to me. It doesn't sound brand new, but it looks new. So we start off with Mudehim and pillars there, Their. So, and it's pillars is probably the better way to say it. That's the column, the pillar, the thing that holds up the front porch, if you will. Arba'a, so 4 pillars. It has 4 pillars. Ve'adnehem, and those 4 pillars have bases or pedestals. Arba, 4 of them. Can you imagine that? Four pillars have 4 bases. Anyway, then it says nechoshet. That's that word that's brass or copper or whatever it is. I don't know if they just don't know, because you look in one place and they call it brass and that's what it is. And by golly, we know everything. And the other one's, oh no, it's copper and that's what it is. And by golly, we know everything. And then in places like Jacinius, it says brass, i.e. copper, making the 2 the same thing. Maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not all that brass. Then it says vavehem. That's that word vav, and its hooks. Kesef, made of silver. Zipui. Man, this is full of pui. Zipui, that's what it says. Zipui. And overlaid metal that's overlaid. Rashehem. Their heads are overlaid with pui. Sorry. That's the Hebrew word. I didn't make that up. So it's the tops. If you think of a column, they always have, well, not always, but usually they have a top on them. And some of them look like a scroll. That's what they're intended to look like. At the top they have the little spinny part. That's supposed to look like a scroll. That does come from this very place, from the Bible. You see that in state capitals where there's supposed to be a separation of church and state. Don't tell anybody. They'll start tearing them down. Anyway, yeah. Those, I forget what they're called, but scroll, I think, is part of the name. And then you have some that are just kind of square or just round or whatever. They have the different styles. But this is when they're talking about the rosh, the head of the column, they're talking about the top piece. This is vahashukehem, and clasp they, or it's clasped. So it's going to have some clasp because we're holding up a whole lot of curtains here. Then the kesef, those need to be made of silver. So your translation, and their 4 columns and their 4 bases of brass and their hooks of silver and their tops and their clasps overlaid with silver. So part of it's brass and part of it's silver. There's a lot of conjecture about why. The brass tends to be the part that nobody sees, and the silver tends to be the part they see, so they think it's all for aesthetical purposes. The truth is, nobody knows because God didn't tell us. Neither did Moshe. Just throwing that out there. All right, verse 20. and all the tent stakes to Mishkan and to court round about brass. That one sounds really familiar. Yeah, guess because we've had it before. So the translation is, and all the tent stakes for the Mishkan and the court around it of brass. So all of the tent stakes, can you imagine that made of brass? That doesn't sound very strong to me. Doesn't say that brass, I think, is a mixed metal, so I guess depending on how it's mixed, depends on how much strength it has. But the stakes that literally hold all of that stuff together are to be made out of brass. Now, in chapter 27 and verse 19, it said, all the instruments of the Mishkan in all its service, all of its, speaking of the Mishkan, all of its tent stakes, and all the tent stakes of the court of brass. Now, think about it. You have the Mishkan, that's the tabernacle, right? That's the big tent. So it's got all of those 3 layers of stuff over the top, and that's got to be held in place, bang, 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 with those brass dooley whackers. And then you got the poles to help hold it up and all. And then you have the fence that goes around it. They have basically posts that are sitting on pedestals, and they have the curtains that, make up a fence. And then they have ropes that are going to hold those things in place. And the ropes are tied down with brass, when I say dilly whackers, brass tent stakes. Anyway, so they must have been strong. They were at least strong enough to do that. So it held up the fence that went around it. Could be called a sorech. Those of you who know what that means. And then they hold up the tent itself. So there was a lot of these. Rashi, even Ezra, and Saporno all agreed that the instruments included everything needed for erecting and dismantling the tabernacle. Kasuda wrote the following. The Torah does not state in which part of the court's area the tabernacle was to be placed. You always see the picture and it's always dead center and all that, but he's pointing out it doesn't say where it went. We don't know if it was dead center. We don't know if it was back in the corner. We don't know if it was up against the fence over here or up against the fence over there, turned sideways. We don't know. That's what he's trying to point out here. So he says, we don't know where it was placed. And he said, if we were to assume the principle of schematic symmetry, the prevailing theory would appear to be correct, namely that the entrance of the tabernacle was located on the line dividing the length of the court into 2 equal parts. There was an area 50 cubits long in front of the tabernacle and 50 cubits from there in the other direction, allowing 30 cubits for the length of the tabernacle and 20 behind it. There was also a space of 20 cubits on both sides, south and north, between the tabernacle and the hangings. If this was so, again, we don't know, the ark was situated exactly in the center of the western half of the court, and the altar possibly was placed in the middle of the eastern half. But there is not the slightest indication of all this in the text. We have the same problem with the temple, the one made out of stone and all that. Whether it's Solomon or it's Herod's temple, makes no difference. We have no idea where they were placed, and for that matter, exactly the positioning of it. We don't know. Nobody ever gave us that information. All right, now, moving into verse 21, Kasuto called verses 21 through chapter 39, verse 1, because it's broken up in the wrong place. But the rest of it. An inventory of materials used for the tabernacle. Every bit of this is brand new-ish. Anyway, the words, it literally would be these sums, Mishkan, the testimony, that some upon Mount Moshe service the Leviim, in hand Ithamar, son Aharon the Cohen. Ele, these. Fekude, these sums. It's to strike upon or against any person or thing. Hence, in a good sense, to go to any person or thing, it's to visit, to inquire as to their welfare, to go in order to inspect and explore, hence to search, for the sake of inspecting, reviewing, hence, wow, this sounds just like the Christian version of what a deacon does, or an apostle, or something like that. Not sure which. Doesn't it sound just like that? For the sake of inspecting, blah, blah, blah. Looking after other people, to set anyone over anything, to put their care in someone's charge. I mean, it sounds just like that, doesn't it? These are the sums. That'll make sense later, I hope. Ha Mishkan. You remember that's the fancy word for the big tent in the wilderness, right? The Mishkan. Because this is the movable temple, if you will. It's the one that was in the desert that they set up and tore down and set up and tore down many times. Then it says Mishkan Ha'edut. So it's first it's saying the Mishkan comma, and then it's saying the Mishkan Ha'edut, right? So the tabernacle of testimony, the tabernacle of Edut. They're not telling me what the word actually means. They're just telling you the use of it. Because they're saying a precept of God. Law, especially used of the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, the Ark of the Law. Yeah, it's a witness. It's a testimony. All right. The base word here is ed. Y'all have a friend named Ed to witness something. That's what this word means. This is asher. That means that. T-H-A-T, or maybe W-H-I-C-H. It's those simple words. Hukad. Now we have some, to strike upon against any person, hence in a good sense to go to a person to visit, to just had that word, right? Going up for a second time. Al, which means upon, or to or towards. Upon is fine. P, that's the Hebrew word for mouth. You would spell it P-I in English, but you would pronounce it P, not P, but P. It's the mouth. And so we have upon the mouth, Moshe. That's an idiom. Upon the mouth of Moshe. It's by the command given via his mouth. So it's idiomatic. This is avodat. That's the word for service, labor, work, especially rustic labor, agricultural service used in particular in sacred ceremonies, right? Service. Ha-Levi'im. That's the Levites. It's where you get the word in English, Levites, Levi'im. Beyad, that's in hand, Ithamar. Ithamar being a person. In the hand of Ithamar. So Moshe gave the command, and in the hand of Ithamar is another idiom, his power, by his authority. And then it says Ben, which means son, Aharon. So this was the nephew of Moshe, his brother Aharon. They call him Aaron. This is his son, Ha-Cohen, Aharon, the priest, the Cohen. All right, so your translation then is, this is the completion of the Mishkan. The Mishkan of testimony that was completed by the command on the mouth, by the command of Moshe, for the service of the Levi, managed, that's in the hand of, managed by Ithamar, the son of Aharon the Cohen. Should I say all those things in English? This is the completion of the tabernacle of testimony that was completed by the command of Moshe for the service of the Levites, managed by Ithamar, the son of Aharon, the Cohen, the priest, I meant to say. Completion. Kasuto used the word reckoning, i.e. a detailed inventory of materials used in the completion of the tabernacle, he said. Of the words in work performed by the Levites under the direction of supervision of Itamar. Kasuto believed these verses to be a balance sheet, as it were, a profit and loss statement, a detailed record of all that was given and all that was spent. I doubt this account was meant to be such an accounting, and would submit that it was nothing more than the tellings that took place to the best of the writer's recollection and ability. I simply do not buy into this idea that suddenly a religion who answers only to God is suddenly answering to the people. Only here, never again. And we're going to go back to answering to God in the next verse. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. Or a few verses later. Next chapter. Let me put it that way. This is not a spreadsheet. This is not a reckoning for the people so that they know what happened. This is just a summation of what just tells us some pretty good details. But most of the details aren't being told. There's way more left out than what we're being told. If this were a spreadsheet, this guy'd be fired by the firm I used to work for. If this is a profit and loss statement, this guy don't know what a profit and loss is. I'm just saying. I worked for an accounting firm for a while. That guy would not have made it working where I did. Anywho, verse 22. And Bezalel, better look still, I have time, son of Uri, sorry, son of Hur, to staff Yehuda, did all the command, all that did Yahweh, Moshe. All right. And I'm looking at the Hebrew word and saying the English words. And the guy's name is Bezalel. Bezalel. There's a stutter sound after the B. So this guy, this is the one that was, in charge of the artistical part and looking over all the craftsmen. This guy, he was the son, they say, of Uri. And then it says Ben, so Uri was the son of Hur. Then it says Lemate. That's to the staff, for the staff. I'm adding does, it's not really in there. To staff or for staff. Why would they say staff? What's the staff got to do with anything? It's a branch, it's a twig. So called from the idea of stretching out a rod, a staff. Especially used of the rod of a king, a scepter, of a soldier's spear, of a rod used in chastening, a tribe, properly a branch of the people. Only used of the tribes in the Bible, only used in the Bible of the tribes of Yisrael. Just saying. Yeah, so this is the guy who was the head of the tribe of Yehuda, also known as Judah these days. This is Asa, properly to labor, to work, about, to make, to produce, to manufacture. We've had that word a lot, a whole lot. It called all that Ziva, not the name. This is Ziva. All that commanded, all that was commanded, set up, constituted, to appoint. What they're really talking about is the word we use for our Constitution, right? It's the foundation of the country. It's the thing that's set up. If somebody asks you, what's the law of the land in America? The answer, the proper answer, the Constitution. That's the law of the land in America. At least it used to be. Now people don't believe in it anymore and trample all over it. And, well, let's not get into that. That's where I start sounding like a crazy conspiracy. I don't even believe in conspiracy theories. Anyway, but that piece of paper is what founded this country. And so what they're saying here, they're using this word where this is the founding of the Jewish religion. Yes, it goes all the way back to Abraham, way before the actual founding, but we did the same thing. We came over here, we got in a war with the people, with the country we left, and eventually we founded a country, right? So there's always something that happens before the actual founding. And this is kind of that same thing. You had Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all those people way before the actual founding. What's going on here is literally the founding of the Jewish religion, the founding of our Constitution. These are, before we start into the serious thou shalt and thou shalt nots, we have to set up a place where our governor, our God, can oversee the issues that come before him. So we're setting up the court system at this point. The one that God set up, by the way, it was socialistic. Yeah, socialism comes from the Bible. It does not come from Stalin and Lenin and other various socialists and communists. No, it didn't come from there. The first socialist society is right here. We're reading about it. That fully socialist society that we can turn to from Judaism is Qumran. All you got to do is read their documents. You'll know that's socialist. But the difference in our world is that socialism never works, because without a benevolent God who is always going to rule properly, men are fallible. Men can be bought and sold like commodities. Yeah, they can. And they often are. So socialism cannot work outside a place where God sits in the tabernacle. It just can't. God is the one that has to decide these things. Could that work here on earth? Without God, the fire and the smoke and all that? Yes, it could, because God's already laid out the law. All we have to do is get people who will follow it. Still got the same problem. People don't. Maybe they'll follow it for 14 years and there's peace and yeast. Next 20 years are horrible because, King so-and-so decided not to follow the Constitution. This is that word, but it's commanded. Yahweh, God set this up. These words, these ideas, these concepts came from God Almighty. So this is the things that God commanded Moses. So here's what it should say. And Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehuda. Oh, he's of the tribe, not the leader of the tribe. I don't know where I got that a while ago. Anywho, so he's of that tribe, created everything Yahweh commanded Moshe. Now, he didn't do it personally. He oversaw it. I'm sure a lot of it he did. No doubt about it. He was the great artisan, so surely he did some of it. Maybe he did, maybe he don't. We don't have to call you Shirley, right? Anyway, you follow what I'm saying, I hope. Of the word created, not Monadel, did not actually create everything, but that he supervised all of the work. And yes, he is absolutely right. In going through my books, the ones that I use to put all this stuff together, you won't believe all the marking out and the writing the note, this is total hooey above it, because, did they ever get off on some nonsense with this? Oh, he was all full of the holy smoke, and he was all this, that, and, 3 bags of chips and whatnot. No, he was just the guy that was put in charge because of his creativity and his knowledge and experience in craftsmanship. That's all that's ever being said here. I am down to 5 minutes, and I couldn't possibly get through this next one in that time span. So we will have to call it a day here. Shalom, shalom, y'all.